Resources and Education meeting for July 11th, 2019. Ms. Campbell, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Hines? Here. Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Derman?
Here.
Mr. Luke?
Here.
Mr. Harold?
Here.
Mr. Nation? Mrs. Richardson?
Here.
Mr. Winkler?
Here.
Mrs. Drucker? Mr. Betancourt? Mrs. Lamy?
Here.
Mr. Hersey?
Here.
Mr. Burrow?
Here.
Mr. Kuzan?
Here.
Mrs. Page?
Would everyone please stand and join us in the invocation and prayers led by Mrs. Lamy?
Thank you, Father, for bringing us here tonight, Lord. We thank you for your guidance and wisdom, and we ask you to help us to make wise decisions, to listen with open ears and open hearts, and that every choice we make would be focused on what's best for our students and bringing them in the right direction. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We move on to item 2, public comments. 5 minutes. When you step up to the podium, I'd like for you to please state your name for the record. The first person is Mrs. Lee Barrios.
My name is Lee Barrios. I'm a retired teacher from St. Tammany. During this meeting, curriculums of Eureka Math and ELA guidebooks will be addressed. I'm going to set the tone for you by reading this excerpt from a piece written by a student. It's a beautiful piece of prose and illustrates the angst of students, teachers, and parents nationwide. I don't like your A's and your F's. Beneath the height of one lies the abyss of the other. My turn to hand out the letters. I'm giving you an F. Your curriculum is bloated with minutiae. It's designed for test taking, not life beyond the classroom. You fail to see that my intelligence is an ever-changing river, not a puddle for you to stand in and frown. Your yardstick measures the length of your reach, not the depth of my abilities. There is no me for your standards to assess. There's only the act of my becoming. How can you measure such a thing? I come to you in chrysalis form, and you hurry or delay me. Never do you simply let me emerge. No, I do not fail. You fail when you make me choose from your multiple choice answers what the poet means when she says this or breaks her stanza there. Your education factory assembles each student in the same order. First this piece, then the next. Units are assessed as they move down the line. The standards are high with little room for deviation. Those who fail inspection are stalled in production. The ones who pass are given certificates and sent out to market. What happens to the defective units who fail your algebra inspection, or those who wither from Common Core English requirements that demand repeated, tedious analysis of technical, figurative, and connotative meanings of isolated passages? You get an F for killing learning. We arrive at your gates with insatiable curiosity for reasoning and puzzle solving, for crayons, and their power to create the worlds we imagine. We want to learn magic. How 26 letters of the alphabet can be rearranged to tell us as many stories as there are people in the world. You get an F for stealing time from teachers by giving them mountains of test-driven content to shovel. Under your regime, teachers have no time to engage us with creative lessons designed using their knowledge and professional educators as experts. Would you, the non-expert, do this to a doctor, a firefighter, a pilot? Class time shouldn't be spent prepping for standardized tests that are written and scored by private testing companies earning billions off the mandates of corporations and public officials. You get an F for yielding to their lobbyists and another F for driving talented teachers into retirement by forcing them to drill questions. By the time you're done with this, we want nothing to do with school-related things like reading. Your textbooks are produced by a mysterious panel of experts. We've all got iPhones in our pockets now. Ask us something thought-provoking, something we can't Google. We came to you curious, inclined to gawk at the mistakes and the glory of others. History is a lit fire. We're naturally drawn to its heat, and you smother it with bricks of drudgery. If you want to raise compassionate and knowledgeable citizens, get rid of the state's bargain bin of disposable information and let the teacher deliver the gold. Elie Wiesel's story about his survival as a teenager in Nazi death camps is gold. If you give her time, she'll have us read the book in class, not at home with Cliff Notes or in short story form from ELA guidebooks. Then she'll draw us into a circle and listen. We'll have questions far better than any test could ever ask us. Your one-size-fits-all prerequisites for academic success are a setup for failure. Signed, failed to meet standards. Thank you.
You're welcome. Second person is Ms. Diane Moore. Ms. Diane Moore.
Good evening. I am Diane Moore. Recently, I watched an HBO miniseries called Chernobyl. In the series, it made clear that the disaster was greatly worsened because those in authority refused to admit there was a problem, even after being repeatedly told that there was a crisis occurring. Today, there is a crisis occurring in public schools. Math instruction. Those in authority have been repeatedly warned about this danger, but refuse to admit there is a problem. Let me take you back to the year 2005, when I first began sounding the alarm. You might recall we had a hurricane in 2005. After weeks of the schools being closed, I was a parent anxious to hear how my twin sons' first days back in the 6th grade were going when the schools finally reopened. My oldest claimed everything seemed fine, except that he wished the schools would still teach math. I told him I was quite sure that the schools were still teaching math. That's when he told me, well, they say they're teaching math, but what they're teaching is not math. By the next week, he was organizing a petition to have real math taught again in schools. That's when I contacted Mary Kay Bellisario, who was hearing similar complaints from other parents in the parish. She put several of us parents together, and we organized a parent meeting to discuss the new math program. In a time where many of us were gutting houses by day, we had over 100 parents show up at a meeting to discuss math. At that meeting, we learned that the parish had adopted this new math program on the recommendation of Dr. Grant Wiggins from Harvard. We left that meeting feeling defeated. We certainly wouldn't be able to compete against a program that had been recommended by Harvard. And at that point, our momentum may have ended, except that I had somebody new I needed to research, Dr. Grant Wiggins. Remember that name. It will become important again soon. Another one of the moms in our group, Sharon Hewitt, you might know her now as Senator Sharon Hewitt, had reached out to a friend she knew at a local university about the math program and had received a response. That made me think that we should reach out to professors of math, and including Harvard. I sent letters to the top 5 math universities at the time. Almost immediately, we began receiving replies from 4 of the top 5 math universities. The first reply we heard from was Dr. James Milgram from Stanford University. You might have heard of Dr. Milgram before. In 2010, he was the only mathematician on the Common Core Validation Committee, and in the end, he refused to sign off on the standards. He wrote back with a dire warning that it might be okay for students that wanted to work at Burger King, but students would not be prepared for careers that used higher math. Dr. Wilfried Schmid from Harvard wrote back that the math program was, quote, an awful choice. Another Harvard professor, Dr. Clifford Taubes, wrote back that the program could be a disaster. Mary Kay Bellisario quickly informed then Superintendent Gail Sloan that our parent group had these letters from top math universities that were damning of the new math program. She informed then Superintendent, and of course my iPad's going to go wrong, then Superintendent Gail Sloan that we had these letters. Gail Sloan did not want this information getting out into the public, so she cut us a deal. She agreed that she would buy the curriculum, the whole parish, a new math curriculum, if our parent group kept these letters silent, which we did. So the parents never heard, the public never heard that these letters were in existence. But earlier today, I emailed every one of you some of these letters. Remember Grant Wiggins? If you look and research Eureka Math, you will find Dr. Grant Wiggins in the pacing schedule of Eureka Math is referenced 5 times. I sent you that pacing schedule earlier today as well. We are using the same math that we rejected in 2005 and 2006. It came up again in 2013, and you're bringing it back again. I'm a parent that doesn't have students in the system anymore. Those little boys that organized that petition, my children, they're now successful mechanical engineers. They wouldn't be there at this point if this math continued. That's why I'm here tonight. That's why I drove out in a hurricane, because this hurts my heart what you're doing to these children. This is not just a bad math program. This is a soul-crushing math program that will destroy these children's education. It's nothing less than that. And you need to know what is going on in this school system, because it's going to come back and haunt you if you do not stop this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Next is Cindy Renee Winch.
Good evening, board members and educators. I'm Cindy Renee Winch, and I'm announcing my candidacy for Louisiana House of Representatives District 74. I'm the daughter of a high school student and I'm daughter of a high school teacher and attended public schools, including Louisiana School for the Math, Science, and Arts and LSU Baton Rouge. I was able to graduate college and become a productive member of society because of a appropriately state-funded educational system and TOPS program. Therefore, I am a strong advocate of public education and against the privatization of public schools. It is clear that you also agree with how vital the quality of education is for all families, since you are the highest performing large school district in the state and provide far more opportunities than other parishes for special education students. My brother and sister are special needs, so it means a lot to me personally that you have paid attention to this often ignored demographic. However, due to decades of Baton Rouge politicians slashing funds to the Louisiana Department of Education, this generation of children may not be given the same opportunities as I. A recent example of state-level priorities against public education is that the legislature approved only half of the total MFP when it should have been approved at 2.75%. Another stance of mine is that I am a strong supporter of local control. Federal and state entities should not ultimately determine that curriculums like Common Core be forced upon your districts. And local agencies such as the school board should make the fiscal decisions of either accepting or rejecting ITEPs instead of some undistinguished board in Baton Rouge. When elected as District 74's next representative on October 12th, I, Cindy Renee Winch, will support legislation that protects the funding of public education, as well as any bill that continues control of local school boards in determining ITEP taxation and curriculum implementation. I ask you to support my candidacy for Louisiana House District 74, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wynn. Next, we have Nia Smith. Ms. Smith, is she here? Okay.
Hi, I'm Nia Smith. I'm in 8th grade at Mandeville Junior High. I'm here tonight to speak from a student's perspective on the current curriculum. These past 2 years, my family has found the guidebooks and Eureka lacking in enrichment and advancement in the gifted classes. I spoke with Amy Lemaine to discuss concerns with the current curriculum. She reported that she is proactively working with teachers to enrich the curriculum. I appreciate her attention to this serious matter. With St. Tammany Parish public schools in the past, mans have reached incredible heights in their education. One is now working on her PhD in an Ivy League school, Columbia. The other is graduating from Tulane Law this year. We have similar high ACT scores from 7th grade, high enough to qualify for the national top 10% of high school seniors. What student potential, then, is being squandered? There is no point in drawing models when the math problem is simple, or writing the same essay over and over with a rotating cast of characters. These mundane activities only frustrate gifted students, depleting our enthusiasm and throttling the development of our critical thinking skills and love of learning, adding barriers to our potential career trajectories. School has become about rote memorization instead of learning how to learn. We have a gifted class to give the students that think differently a chance to fulfill their potential. Using guidebooks undermines this, and top-performing students are left with the same degree of difficulty as the on-level classes. How can we challenge the gifted students to excel? I would like to see advanced instruction and creativity introduced back into the classroom for gifted students.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Elizabeth Berner. Elizabeth Berner.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Berner. 30 years ago, my parents moved our family from the South Shore to pursue the opportunity for a better education. That education through our public school system provided myself and my siblings the background we would need to have successful careers. I obtained my civil engineering degree from LSU with a minor in structural engineering and graduated with honors. As I went along my way, I found my niche in the petrochemical industry, performing structural design and obtaining my license to practice engineering. My husband also received his mechanical engineering degree and master's from LSU and is also a licensed engineer. At the beginning of last school year, after being in the public school system for 4 years, we noticed a decline in the quality of education our children were receiving. My youngest child, in first grade, was not receiving a quality education in spelling, reading, or math. This was very concerning to me, as we all know that without a strong foundation, future success is uncertain. Throughout a year of emails, meetings, and conferences, little was addressed. I'd like you as parents to know that these curricula being utilized make no differentiation between the vast differences in our children's brains. Whether your child is on level, special needs, or even gifted, these curricula offer no modifications. With the potential of them becoming scripted, I can't imagine how your child's teacher will be able to meet the variety of individual needs within the classroom. My children did academically well with the curriculum, but the content of Eureka, the various methods, the steps within those methods, and the terminology is too advanced for a young mind to understand, and left her with a negative self-image when it came to math. At 6 years old, she also developed test anxiety. As the year progressed, my concern grew. I even heard her mutter the words, "I hate math." Imagine my dismay as a minority in the STEM field and the mother of a bright little 6-year-old girl whose first true educational exposure to math has left her defeated. When I asked, where is the research to back this curriculum, I was informed that Louisiana does not consider nationally based research in its adoption of curricula. In fact, this particular curriculum had been voted out of St. Tammany Parish just a few years ago. I'd like to share with you a quote I came across when researching the Eureka curriculum. It reads, "While they believe this child represents one with a deep understanding, they have instead created a child for whom understanding foundational math is not even doing math." Look at your child's papers, drawing lines, circles, and dots. Math facts are gone, as Eureka prides itself on getting rid of memorization. Memory is a skill that is necessary to our world's leading professions: surgeons, doctors, lawyers, pilots. If you ask any memory champion, they will tell you that it is an exercise for the brain which is only improved upon by practice. Addition, subtraction, and multiplication as we learned it are gone. Eureka prides itself on removing logic that the traditional algorithms are based upon. Our computer programs that make our world work are based on logic. These are called if-then statements. If you have this condition, then you do this. It's a simple set of rules. I cannot conceive of a student pursuing a STEM career without receiving these fundamental skills. Eureka wants to move away from pure computation to applied math. Seeing a child demonstrate applied math is a wonderful thing, but we need to give these children the basics to do so. As an engineer, I do not need a deeper understanding of why the traditional algorithms work. I do not need a deeper understanding of fractions. As I design and analyze structures, I simply use the tools I have and move on. For example, I convert a fraction to decimal form without this deeper understanding that Eureka advertises. Just prior to last year, our schools used a blend of math curricula, including Eureka, to educate our children. I saw no issue with that. Eureka has some wonderful concepts, but is not so great at implementing them, and should be used as another tool in the toolbox as opposed to being the only tool.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the 3 minutes, but I'd like to remind you to please state your name and address for the record once before you speak, okay? We're going to start off with 3 minutes, and the first person is Mary Adams. Mary Adams?
Hi, my name is Mary Adams. I'm here today to express my concern over the parish-wide supply list, missing basic items, and wish lists no longer being allowed. I have emailed Mr. Folse and his assistant superintendents, as well as several board members who were kind enough to reply. Mrs. Lemaine was kind enough to speak with me today and promised to look into my concerns and get back with me. I've also looked at lists from 16 other schools across 8 parishes, and our supply lists pale in comparison to those. And only one other parish is using parish-wide list. In reply to my email, it was mentioned that your intention was not for teachers to come out of pocket for these missing items, but for the instructional budget to be used to cover those missing items, which leads me to question if that instructional budget is now being used for those items, what is it not able to cover? There is also the issue of special ed, speech, art, library, and music teachers. Where will those supplies come from? In the past, they have been a part of wish list items, which is my understanding are no longer allowed. I want to thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing how this important issue will be addressed.
Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Thank you. Next, we have Shannon Over. Shannon Over.
Hi, Board. I am Shannon Over. I'm from Mandeville, Covington, Louisiana. I have 3 children that have been very successful through St. Tammany Parish schools, and 2 that are currently enrolled that I can tell you the quality of education they're receiving today is abysmal compared to what my first 3 kids had. We were known across the state as being one of the top and leading parishes for education. If we use a scripted Eureka and if we use a scripted guidebooks, we are common to the state. We are not different. We do not differentiate education, and our taxes don't reflect that, nor do our property values. You're going to see people leaving in droves or attending private school because they have the money to do so. My husband doesn't need to commute an hour a day or more, as most people do, if we're going to get the same curriculum in Metairie, Kenner, Baton Rouge, or any of our other surrounding places. Slidell is on the east side of the parish, and I understand there's some schools there that may need intervention, but our schools, Pontchartrain and Tchefuncta, do not, and Mandeville High and Mandeville Junior High shouldn't as well. I think that the board should also reflect on our teachers. My 3 older children had teachers with over 20 years of experience or more, or maybe even 15, that we trusted, you trusted, with their education. What happened? Why don't you trust our teachers? You're giving them scripted curriculum. Our ACT scores have fallen. That should show you this state test that the places that it is true, actually. It is true. And the school superintendent of the state, he wrote the state test to include Eureka and include the other guidebooks. So of course the schools that are mandating that curriculum do better. But nationally, which I believe most of our children in St. Tammany are aiming for a national stage, not a state stage, they are not going to be able to get into these colleges. They're not going to be prepared for the curriculum. My son's a mechanical engineer, graduated LSU in 4 years. He was prepared. These kids, my daughter, who's in gifted and an 11-year-old, she's not prepared. And I'm telling you, as someone who's experienced it with 3 older children, and yes, I'm nervous, and I'm not used to public speaking, but it's very upsetting to me because they were prepared, and I'm paying the same amount of money, if not more, in taxes to live here, and I'm getting much less from the parish than I used to get. And I feel like you guys need to understand that some of the teachers have experience and knowledge. They can teach these kids without a scripted curriculum. We need to support our teachers. We don't need to support the state. We don't need their money. We are more than enough. We have more than enough money in this parish to not need the federal funds that little bit you get from supporting these 2 curriculums. We do not need it. And I'm please begging you to get rid of this curriculum. It is destroying our parish. And you will see it. You will see it. Within 10 years, you will see it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Over. Next, we have Melissa Lacali. Is that right? Did I pronounce your name right?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Melissa Lacali from Metairie. I am the Education Director for ADL's South Central Region and a bullying prevention specialist for over 10 years. ADL is a 100-plus-year-old anti-hate organization whose mission is to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment for all. Through one of our signature programs, No Place for Hate, we provide schools with access to bullying prevention best practices and anti-bullying and anti-bias resources. I also serve on the Louisiana Bullying Awareness and Treatment Task Force Committee, working directly with the Louisiana Department of Education and with legislators on that committee. I am here today to offer both ADL support and resources to St. Tammany Parish School District. Part of my work in bullying prevention has included working with schools across the country, helping them to put feet to their policy. While it is required for districts to have a policy in place, oftentimes the policy does not give clear steps for all stakeholders involved in this process. Almost 2 years ago, I was working in a K-8 school with 1,000 students near New Orleans. We had been using what is considered to be the most researched and oldest program available. It was also a very costly program. But our school, in response to Act 861 through Louisiana Believes, thought it was necessary to be proactive regarding these issues. My main responsibility was to see that this program was properly implemented according to the laws in place. However, it wasn't until I was introduced and began implementing No Place for Hate that real change took place in our school. Our state-reported incidents went down from 17 reported incidents to 5 the very first year. The second year, it went down from 5 to 3. Our school's data was housed by SWIS, School-Wide Information Systems, through the University of Oregon. Students were beginning to self-direct, and teachers were reporting getting valuable teaching time back. ADL is also an incident response organization. We not only respond to incidents of hate, like the recent tagging of the North Shore Jewish congregation in Mandeville, but also incidents of bullying. Recently, our office was contacted regarding 2 separate incidents from 2 schools in St. Tammany Parish. These are not isolated cases. We are seeing an increase in these incidents across our region. While I know how difficult it is to investigate and find solutions to these issues, you are not alone. We offer a proven, free program and access to resources, all provided to your schools. We offer a program that is not one that will sit on a shelf. It is a living program with our resources and a bullying prevention specialist available to help you every step of the way. Finally, it is a student-led initiative that won't be the one more thing on the backs of your educators. Through anonymous reporting, working with resource officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCullough. Next, we have Leslie Kyle. Is that right, Leslie?
Hi, y'all. Okay, this is just a mom's perspective. I hope I get through it in my 3 minutes. The pressure to perform on standardized tests is enormous. The scores determine if the teacher retains their position, if the student graduates, and if the school doors close. No one will ever ask either of my children in high school, college, or on a job interview what their LEAP test score was. This no way is prepping our children for real life or how to solve problems, as this curriculum tells them how they should think. The Common Core curriculum, combined with the testing evaluations, is forcing the teachers to lecture a high-impact amount of information in a passive way. The students will never master an educational concept this way. The Common Core standard consists of an hour lecture followed by a worksheet to complete. The students need to work together to provide solutions, employing principles from all subjects rather than a silo lecture and a worksheet to reinforce the lesson. This curriculum does not allow creative thinking, student contribution, or access to resources the school has, such as textbooks, internets, and nature. My children lack pride in their knowledge and schoolwork. There is no collaboration or real-life skills that they're being taught or encouraged. There needs to be incorporation of entire curriculum, including project work, so the students can understand the relationship among the subjects and appreciate how they all fit together. Teachers are not able to direct hands-on learning. My children's teachers used to play an active role in their learning process, and most of all, their well-being. Students are now left behind in coursework, and plenty of assignments are misunderstood. Teachers can no longer tailor instruction or contents based on their students' abilities. Academic success is also based on the student's self-worth, and that can only grow when a teacher can show they care about their students by personalizing their learning and not just quickly covering material and moving on. Anyone can walk into a classroom and teach a scripted lecture. Why would they need a degree? There's no time for students to problem solve using whatever methods they feel work. We used to apply critical thinking to solve problems. Our kids are not getting that. I opt my children out of the park, renamed LEAP testing, as a timed exam that is unfamiliar to them, both in its form and content, does not benefit them. Common Core standards have narrowed the state's curriculum to fit the demands of the test. This level of standardized testing could in no way accommodate any student's difference in need, ability, or interest. The expectation of the test is that most students will perform poorly. I would prefer my children to have more quality instruction time prepping for their next grade level, as the scores normally are not published until after the next school year starts. My children work very hard to excel academically, and does anybody want to come finish? Can I finish? I have like 2 paragraphs. Okay. Sorry, because I really got emotional and I swore I wasn't going to do that. The teachers are the sole individuals that I look to for any indicators that my children may need to progress. It's their job to identify and address their needs. The teachers my children have had at Pontchartrain and Chafuncta love my children, and they have made the greatest impacts on their lives by teaching the way they want to teach, by interacting with all of the students the way they desire to. Okay, last paragraph. They are instrumental in the academic...
I need you to sum it up, please. Can you sum it up right quick?
Okay, I'm done. I mean, I kind of feel like okay, I'm done. Anyway, my point is Common Core needs to be removed from our schools as it does not serve the better interest of the children.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, Miss Melissa Jones, is she here? J-O-H Janet.
I'm going to read fast. Good evening, and thank you for your time and consideration. My name is Melissa Johns, and this is my 15th year teaching in St. Tammany Parish. I have made this very difficult decision of speaking to you tonight because my passion for educating students has once again overridden my common sense for self-preservation. I'm here to speak with you because my students need a voice. They need someone who hears their struggles, understands their situations, and refuses to do them harm. I teach 6th grade math at Carolyn Park Middle School. We're a very small school with about 300 students. Of that number, 86% are economically disadvantaged. 20% have disabilities, and 5% are ELL. These are 3 of these state-defined subgroups that require urgent intervention at our school. As you are aware, the state has required a Tier 1 curriculum for any school in this category. Now, I'd very, very much love to debate the merits of subgroups, the grading system used by the state for school performance scores, and the merit of using a standardized test as the only means of determining student ability. But I got 3 minutes and some pleading to do on behalf of my students. So let's say I accept all of this. Now what? Eureka, the state, and now too my parish says this is the only curriculum I can use. But by 6th grade, Eureka makes the assumption that students have mastered content from previous grades. It makes the assumption that all students are proficient readers and that all students learn the same way. This is not the case. Where Ed Reports reviewed Eureka, it stated that Eureka does not meet the expectation for criterion for differentiated instructions. This is a real problem for my diverse population. These are the facts. This past school year, my math classes, my students that came in, I had 77% of my students below mastery. 61% of them were unsatisfactory or approaching basic on the test from the year before. I know what my kids can and cannot do. I tried again for the 5th year to approach Eureka with fidelity. And my heart and soul went into it, and they weren't getting it. So what do? Do I keep doing it? Do I let them keep failing? No, I don't. I do not, because I am a teacher. I'm an educator, and I know it's not working, and I know what they need. And so I stop, and I do what they need me to do. And I go to the guaranteed curriculum, which has been a beautiful thing to use, because there is so much work and so much there that's valid and useful. And I use the textbook and its ancillary materials that came with it, because there's a lot there too. And what do I get at the end? Let me remind you again, I started with 77% below mastery. I started with 61 unsat or approaching. And what did I finish with? 4% at approaching, 1 student. The other 61% of my students were at mastery or above. If my whole school did what I did, we would be a B in student performance and an A in student progress. My average student growth was 32 points per kid because I educated them.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, we have Stacey Silberstein. Stacey Silberstein.
I'm going to make this quick. My name is Stacey Silverstein, and I live at 10 Cardinal Lane in Mandeville, Louisiana. We have been part of the gifted program for over, my daughter's now going into 6th, my youngest is now going into 5th. The education that was from 2 or 3 years ago was much more challenging and much more inviting and much more thought-provoking. My children at this point are not happy with school. What used to be their savior, school, is now going through the motions. And the teachers have been able to add a little bit of extra challenges, but from what I hear next year, there will be no supplemental material, and it'll just be that Eureka, which is unbelievably horrible, as well as guidebooks, which guidebooks does not have the children read novels, just bits and pieces. And it's not, for my 2 gifted kids, it is not the avenue. I would hope their minds would be expanded more. And I expect a lot better from St. Tammany Parish. And I appreciate you giving me the time to speak tonight. I hope you take consideration that this is not appropriate curriculum for all levels of St. Tammany Parish students.
Thank you. Next, we have Victoria Alqaeda. Is that right?
Hello, I'm Victoria Ikeda.
Ikeda, close.
Very close. And I'm supposed to imagine everybody in their underwear, right? That makes this a lot easier? Okay. Just kidding. I'm a St. Tammany Parish resident for over 7 years. I grew up in Philadelphia. Yes, I'm a Yankee. I went to Tulane for undergrad, and I have a master's degree in elementary education, plus a reading specialist degree. I taught in the poorest school in Miami. I had 31 first graders by myself. I've also taught in California and Virginia. I've taught both in public and private schools, and I have been the lead for my grade level team. I tell you all this not to brag, but to let you know that I have experience and qualifications to speak on these matters. What I haven't told you yet is that I have 3 young sons all in public school here. I think our schools are good, but need to strive to be great. I appreciate the low class sizes and technology that my kids are exposed to on a daily basis, but there is more to be done to ensure our greatness. I would like to bring up 2 matters that are important to me, not only as a mother, but also an educator. I'll be as brief as I can. School supply lists for this year are lacking. I appreciate that you're trying to make it more cost-effective for parents. I wonder, though, how many times you have personally been in a classroom to see how far 12 pencils per student will go. I'm here to tell you, not far at all. It has been stated that schools may make up for the loss in this supplies, but when you're in the middle of teaching a room full of 6-year-olds, it does not behoove you to stop and email your administrator because Johnny doesn't have a pencil. Where do you think the missing or low supplies are going to come from? Teachers are going to have to pay. So yes, they got a $1,000 raise that comes out to about $15 a paycheck, and that will be going to pencils, paper, and glue, the bare minimum needed to successfully teach. I urge you to change these supply lists with input from the teachers and not do a blanket list per grade in the future. My other topic is the Eureka math curriculum. I am discouraged in what I have read and heard from many upper elementary teachers about this new curriculum, that has already been scratched by the parish once before. I have taught scripted programs, Saxon, as well as investigations, Houghton Mifflin, and was given the chance to write my own curriculum based on the standards of the state. In my opinion, one size does not fit all, which is what this parish is going to try to do with Eureka. Teachers need to be given the autonomy to teach their individual students as they see fit, not as someone in central office decides. I'm appalled at the way my gifted student has become a robot to the standardized tests and the curriculum choices that have come out of it. My gifted student has the exact same curriculum as his regular ed cohorts, and I believe that this might be against the law. I implore you to find not only a research-based curriculum, but one that also has proven results. It may be that we need to find a way to use multiple programs to make sure that all of our students are being taught the standards set forth by the state. Not all kids learn in the same way, so give teachers the tools they need with a quality curriculum so they can teach on all levels. Our students are more than just a test score, and our curriculum needs to reflect that. I emailed most people on the board about my concerns, and I only heard back from one. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Kristin Timmons. Kristin Timmons?
Good evening. My name is Kristin Timmons. I live here in Covington, Louisiana. It is nice to be able to speak to you all board members and Mr. Fultz. I come here to you having worn many hats. I am a graduate of Covington High School, 1998. I have been a teacher here in this parish since 2009, and I have taught since 2001 in several places around the state and Texas. I have 2 children in the school system, a student who will be a gifted 5th grader next year and a student who will be in 2nd grade next year. And I also currently serve as the vice president for secondary schools for the Louisiana Association of Mathematics Teachers. So I've seen mathematics instruction and mathematics curriculum from many different perspectives. I've also, I'm on Facebook, so I see a lot of the things that people complain about, besides just the things that have been brought up today. So let me talk about my perspectives. Actually, before I do that, let me make one thing clear because I'll probably run out of time. I am here to advocate for the proper implementation of any mathematics curriculum that you choose. But specifically, I really hope that you either choose to properly implement Eureka or another Tier 1 curriculum. These are Tier 1 curriculums are the only ones designated by the state to fully meet the standards that we are required to teach to our students. If we currently, at least at the high school level, have a tier 2 curriculum, and it shows in our test scores. Back in 2014, when I tried to implement Eureka when it was first rolled out, I continued using it for that whole year, and those test scores for my students were the highest they have been up to that point and since then. And that was me teaching inclusion classes, regular geometry classes, and honors classes. All the groups improved. Now, any curriculum, whether it's Eureka or any of the other ones, while they may have some sort of script to them, they are all made with the understanding that teachers be given the autonomy to do what they need to do in order to meet the needs of their students. Proper implementation means that you, number one, provide professional development and training to teach teachers how to present this information appropriately. Sorry. Oh. Teach teachers how to implement it appropriately. I'm sorry. I usually do better than this.
I'm gonna need you to sum it up, please.
Yes. There are plenty of resources from the state and from other sources that allow for differentiation of Eureka or any Tier 1 curriculum, and for remediation related and in partnership with Eureka. So I just hope that whatever is used, you provide us with all of the resources in order for us to be able to do our best job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, we have Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson.
Good evening. My name is Zach Wilson. I live on Westwood Estates in Mandeville, Louisiana. My wife, Faith, and I are the parents of Asher Wilson, who's going into the 8th grade. He's a student at Fontainebleau Junior High. The 2018-2019 district handbook includes the following language under the heading Student Dress Code for Males. This can be found on page 15. Student dress code for males. The following requirements apply to appropriate grooming and dress for male students. An acceptable, well-groomed haircut will be required of all male students. Styles never should be such that they represent a collective or individual protest. Hair. The length of hair may not fall below the base of a collar on a shirt. Hair arranged in a manner detrimental to the performance of normal educational activities will be prohibited. Hair also must be clean and not unusually colored. Sculptured hairstyles that include pictures, symbols, letters, numbers, etc. will not be permitted. The dress code for females has similar standards as to how hair may be worn, but no standard whatsoever as to length. Our son Asher Wilson, he's here with me this evening, has hair length that is well past the base of his shirt collar, and he has been asked by school staff to keep his hair in a ponytail to meet code. It is our view that this particular dress code that limits the length at which a male may wear his hair is in fact gender discrimination. This view is supported by the fact that the student handbook does not mandate the same hair length code for females. If there is any question as to how the courts of law view gender and sex discrimination, a general web search would prove helpful. It is our request, my wife and I, that the St. Tammany Parish School Board recognize the negative impact that even seemingly small imbalances can produce when they are encoded as law, but don't reflect the values of our American culture. We want our son and the rest of St. Tammany Parish students to realize a culture and society that erases lines, not drawing or making bolder the lines that have been drawn for us by generations past. We want our son and his fellow students to know, sense, feel, and understand that our schools are at their core a beacon of learning and education, unimpeded by a stereotype, your gender, or length of hair. It is our request that the language regarding hair length on males be stricken from the handbook. My wife and I wrote a similar petition that made its way to Mr. Kevin DeRoos via Ms. Kelly Grunditz, who is the principal at his school. The committee voted on it, and they voted it down. They voted to leave this language in the handbook. We would like to get that amended. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, right now, we'd like to move to item number 3, which is approval of minutes for the committee as a whole meeting held on June 6, 2019. Do I have a motion? Okay, I have a motion and a second.
Who made the motion? Ms. Richardson made the
Who's it?
motion.
And the second. Let me get my list out here. So I'll just say. Ms. Richardson made the motion.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, made it that. Any questions from the board or comments? Any questions from the board? Or comments from the public? If not, everyone please vote.
Thirteen, 0 nays.
15 yeas, 0 nay. Thank you. We move on now to item number 4, human resources. Mr. Javier? Nothing? Thank you. Thank you. We move to item number 5, 2019-2020 pupil progression plan. Mrs. DiCarlo and Mrs. Strasburger.
Good evening, Mr. Kuzan, Mr. Folse, board members, and guests. Tonight, Mr. Carlo and I will review the Pupil Progression Plan advisory process, as well as address the 2019-2020 recommendations for revision put forth by the Pupil Progression Advisory Committee. The Pupil Progression Plan review process began with receiving input from principal focus groups. This input was then shared and discussed during the spring principal meetings. The aggregated input was presented and discussed with the Pupil Progression Plan Advisory Committee at the April meeting. These points of consideration were then reviewed at the public input meeting held at Lakeshore High School in early May. The Advisory Committee held a meeting on May 15th to further discuss all considerations and make final proposed recommendations. These discussions included an analysis of all perspectives and possible outcomes. Tonight, we will present the final proposed recommendations for your consideration. The Advisory Committee's function is to review and make recommendations for revision, if necessary, based on all received input. The Advisory Committee consists of administrators, parents, and teachers representing elementary, middle, junior, and high schools across the district.
The St. Tammany Parish's Public Schools makes a commitment to our community through its mission statement to engage all students in a high-quality education, resulting in lifelong learners who can contribute to the society in which they live. As part of this commitment, our Pupil Progression Plan embodies the mission statement, serving as the district's governing body to be reviewed and revised annually. The major topics regarding local policy considerations to be discussed this evening include: remove handwriting as an isolated grade in grades 4 through 6. Include handwriting in the ELA grade in grades 4 through 6. Change foreign exchange student classification from senior to junior. Each proposed recommendation will require a separate board vote for approval. For each of the recommendations, a corresponding handout was made available for your reference. The handout illustrates a comparison between existing 2018-2019 local policy and the proposed 2019-2020 revisions. The first recommendation from the committee is pertaining to grades 4 through 6. That recommendation is to remove handwriting as an isolated O for outstanding, S for satisfactory, N needs improvement, or U for unsatisfactory grade in grades 4 through 6. Include handwriting in the ELA grade in grades 4 through 6. The reasoning behind this recommendation does come from the viewpoint of the teachers on the advisory committee. And their viewpoint is that grading handwriting in isolation is not advantageous for students. Handwriting should be incorporated into the comprehensive ELA grade.
Recommendation number 2 is to change foreign exchange grade classification from senior to junior. Because participation in the ACT test is a requirement for all seniors, and not all of our foreign exchange students wish to participate, the advisory committee is recommending that we change the grade classification of our foreign exchange students to juniors. This change in grade classification will give our foreign exchange students the option to take the ACT. Upon approval, the St. Tammany Parish Public School System 2019-2020 Pupil Progression Plan will be posted on the district's website. And at this time, we'd like to thank you for your time and support, and Mr. Carlo and I are here to answer any of your questions.
We need motions, right?
Yeah, I gotta get any comments. Sure. Do we have any comments, or
You gotta take-
questions from the board? Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Dermott and seconded by,
It has not been separated in the agenda. It's been presented as accepting the whole plan.
okay, so we have to vote on each of them separately? We have to vote on individual, do you need individual votes? Or the whole plan?
David, do we need individual votes?
All right, I amend my motion to include both recommendations.
Okay, who was the second on that?
I second
Okay, second, all right. We have a motion and a second. Any questions, again, from the board? Mr. Green?
Thank you, Mr. Kuzan. Does this mean that the handwriting will have an A, B, C, D, or is that included in a broader ELA?
It's going to be included as a component of the language grade. So when you look into the
So we're not going to have a
handout,
subjective component,
that's correct.
handwriting that's, okay, good.
That's correct.
All right.
That's why they wanted to remove it from being a standout as it is now.
Mr. Green, you finished? Yes, sir. Ms. Lamy?
Mine is just a comment, and it's just as a teacher. I know that's not what we're voting on, but just the importance of teaching handwriting, that still remain. I know that is the plan, but I just want to reiterate that because sometimes that gets lost with so much else that we have to do, and it's just critical, especially cursive.
Correct. This does not pertain to instruction
Okay,
in
I just
any
want to make
which
sure
way.
before I vote on this that I've said that.
That's right. Thank you.
Any other comment? If not, would you please vote? Can you get the?
Mr. Loop, you want to give a verbal vote? Okay. All right.
Okay, we have 13 yeas, no nays.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to item C, curriculum updates. Ms. Lemay? Lamy, I'm sorry.
Good evening, Mr. Kuzan, Superintendent Foles, board members. I'm here tonight to give you an update on our curriculum and instruction as we move forward and get ready to begin the upcoming school year. I'd like to start out with our living statements. Earlier this week, I had the opportunity to meet with our new teachers at New Teacher Induction, and this is a slide that I began with our new teachers because I feel like this is an important piece of who we are as a school system with our living statements with every child every day for a successful tomorrow is it best for kids, and learning to last a lifetime. I pointed out to the new teachers that this really is about the directional system of our school system. And if you notice with each of those statements, that it all pertains to our students, the children within the school system which we are educating. So I think that it's important for us to always remember them whenever we're making decisions. As a teacher, when I was in the classroom, and that was back, quite a few years ago, I'm bringing this up because it's like these statements, these aren't things that were just created or developed over the last few years. Some of these statements have been with us for a very long time. For example, is it best for kids? As a classroom teacher back in the 90s, so that's been over 20 years ago, we were given a sign to put up in our classroom that said, is it best for kids? Nothing else on the sheet of paper, but is it best for kids? And I posted that in my classroom, and it made an impact on me as a classroom teacher. And I've really strived throughout my career that no matter what position I'm in, to when I'm making decisions, to always ask myself, is it best for kids? And if I can say that, no matter what the circumstance is, then I know that I've done the right thing. And often when I'm speaking with administrators and they're questioning, I always try to guide them to using that as their filter. Our success as a school system has impact beyond what's going on here tonight. Our decisions and the success that we experience impacts our students each and every day, our teachers, our schools, our district, and our community. Our students, they're depending on us in the things that we're doing to ensure their success. Our teachers, some of the things that, are implemented, the things that are implemented are going to have an impact on the instruction in their classrooms. And in this time of accountability, when you're looking at the impacts for teachers, their scores impact whether or not they remain tenured. It impacts whether they are eligible for raises. It has an impact on their certification, the renewal of their teaching certificates. So the stakes are high. Our schools were graded. As a school system, we're graded. And as a community, people out in the community and people who are moving here, they look at that performance, they look at our success, and it certainly has a direct impact on our community. So let's take a look at our district performance score. This is from the past school year because we know that data is always lagging, and we don't typically get this until almost Christmas. Our scores from this past school year we're just receiving. And so, and even those, we're not going to be able to finalize teacher evaluations until the end of summer and principals until almost Christmas. So our data here is lagging, but what's important for us to look at here, if we look at the results, we have 2017, just to do a little comparison, with the old formula, our district performance score was a 104.1, which we were considered an A school system. Then in 2018, still using the old formula, we grew to a 105.7, which was still an A. But, things were recalculated and we have a new formula. So for 2018, with the new formula, our district performance score was ranked as an 85.2, which made us a B school system. And as we get those new figures, as we move into the fall, I'll come back to you with updated figures, but this at least gives you an indication of where we're at. When we're looking at accountability, we always want to look at our percent mastery and above. So with our percent mastery for ELA, we're at 56%, and for math, for mastery and above, we're at 23%. And that includes grades 3 through 8. For the ELA, that would be the English 1 and 2, and then for the math, the Algebra 1 and geometry. Okay, so let's look at our growth data. Growth data is determined by whether or not students are meeting their targets. That is figured the state takes their scale score, let's say if it's a fourth grade student, they look at what they would need to achieve to be mastery at the eighth grade level. And there are 4 years for them to get between fourth and eighth grade. They take the difference and they divide it by the 4 years, and the student should grow by that amount each year. So that's how they calculate the growth. So if we look at the ELA, currently we're at 47% for our growth factor for ELA, and the state average is at 48. So you can see where we are in the continuum. All of those dots represent all of the other school systems. For math, we are at 40%, and the state average is 43. Also, I know that some of you are aware of the subgroup intervention labels, and for the 2018-19 school year, these labels were given for the UIN, which is urgent intervention needed. And a school can have a failing subgroup for 1 year and receive this label. So you can see the yellow, it's kind of like that's the warning sign. We have 27 schools that are UIN. And basically the way that those are calculated is they will take a subgroup, whether it be special ed students or maybe your EL students, your English language learners, and they treat that subgroup just as the same as they would the whole school, and they calculate a score, and that gives the school, those labels for those particular subgroups. So UIR, those are schools that have had failing subgroups for at least 2 years, and we have 14 schools that currently have that label. So for UIR schools, the requirements, and this is part of the ESSA plan, and our state submitted an ESSA plan, to the federal government, that it requires these UIR schools, these academic UIR schools, to, number one, have a Tier 1 curriculum in ELA and math with LDOE monitoring. So the state will be coming in to monitor these schools to make sure that they are implementing Tier 1 curriculum this upcoming school year. It requires professional development from a high-quality vendor provider, which means Tier 1. At least one high-quality assessment in ELA and math. Partnerships with teacher preparation programs, an administrator and teacher to participate in intervention content leader programs. And then if a school were to become a CIR school, meaning another year with failing subgroup, then they would also be required to have one mentor teacher to support new and resident teachers, one ELA and math content leader. And again, whenever you see content, you can rest assured that that's going to be tied to Tier 1. So, looking and moving forward, now that we've looked at the data and all of the pieces and how that's going to impact us, I want to remind us that we are St. Tammany Parish Public School System, and we're a team, and we're all on the same team. And this is about our teachers, because they're the ones who are in the classrooms each and every day with our students, and making sure that we're doing what we need to do to support them and making sure that they have the resources that they need. So when we're trying to look forward to ensure their success, the success of our students, the success of our schools, our school district, for the benefit of our community, we need to make sure that we have curriculum alignment. When you look at curriculum alignment, there are 3 key pieces. You have written curriculum, you have taught curriculum, and you have what is assessed. Your written curriculum looks like the guaranteed curriculum. That's what's written. Those instructional resources that you're using, that's written curriculum. What's taught is actually what's going on in the classroom, what the teacher is teaching. And then what's assessed is going to be what's on the test. That can be the teacher's assessments that they're using as we progress through the year, those formative assessments that they give to students to help them determine whether or not they need to remediate, reteach, or perhaps even, skip some things that the students already mastered to accelerate. And then also, too, the assessment piece is that summative assessment that we have at the end of the year, or close to the end of the year, where we have to administer the state assessment. So when we're looking at curriculum alignment, the tighter the alignment we have with the written, the taught, and the assessed, you can see that area in the middle that's overlapped becomes larger. And that piece in the middle is what's showing you the impact that these three things being aligned has on student learning. So if we're not aligned, if we're not teaching the standards that are being taught or that are being assessed, if there's no overlap, there's not going to be very much impact. So, in looking at our curriculum, and this is another slide that I shared with our new teachers because I think it's important for us to have a consistent message. In the guaranteed curriculum, the design and the intent is for the curriculum in there to be aligned to the content standards. And those materials and resources are for teachers to adapt and supplement to make sure that they are meeting the needs of their students to achieve mastery of content standards. The statement of supplementing lessons to meet student needs and mastery of content standards has been posted in the guaranteed curriculum since 2013. We do not have a scripted curriculum. When you look at things such as guidebooks and Eureka that have scripts, the intent of scripts are for the novice teacher to look, to read, to develop an understanding, to assist them and guide them, not for them to use as a script in the classroom. The intent of the curriculum is for teachers to use it as a resource to help them align their instruction to the standards that students need to master. It's their job as the instructional leader in the classroom to adapt and supplement lessons. Over the last few days, I've taken the opportunity to invite in some of our teachers because I wanted to make sure that we hear from our teachers because it's their voice that we need to be listening to. They're the ones who are in the classrooms with the students delivering the instruction. I invited in one teacher in ELA and one teacher in math from every school in our school system. Over the last 3 days, I have met with almost 130 teachers in groups of 10 because I wanted to make sure that I had the opportunity to hear what it is that they have to say. So that was 13 groups, 13 hours over 3 days, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I am here to tell you tonight that we should be proud of the educators that we have in our classrooms. They care about our children. They care about their craft. They care about the content. They want to do the very best job that they can in meeting the needs of our students. I want to share with you some of the results of what they had to say because I assured them that I was here to be their voice to communicate to you what it is that they're doing and where they think that they need support. So I'm going to go through, and in future meetings, I'll be sure to pull in more of the information, but for time purposes, I'm not going to go into all of the details because when you hear from 130 teachers, they had a lot to say. But just to give you some of the highlights, so starting with the lower grades, like the K to 2 for ELA, they said, so one of the questions I asked is, so what is working? They said that Ready Gen is working, that they felt like that there was rigorous text and questioning. They liked the writing and the vocabulary. I asked what is challenging, managing the time and pacing, that it's hard for them to get everything in, which, that's something that's common no matter what a teacher teaches. It's always hard to get everything in. They said that they could use a little more support with phonics and grammar, but they know that with the ERLA implementation starting this fall, that, that some of those pieces would be coming. They felt that they needed more training, and also for us to take a look at some leveled library resources, which I think that the ERLA is going to provide some of that as well. They also mentioned that, assessments was an area. Then moving forward to the grades 3 through 5 for ELA, I said, what is working? They said guidebooks. So the teachers in grades 3 through 5 are saying guidebooks are working. What is challenging? And what do they need more support for? The writing. They also said the mechanics piece with the grammar, the spelling, vocabulary, and also assessments, because the guidebooks don't come with assessments. So basically, with the guidebooks units that they have, the information is available online. They're printing it out, but they don't have the paid pieces with the assessments. So they're having to pull and do a lot of research and digging to get those assessment pieces that they need to help support them with what they're delivering. Grades 6 through 8, what is working? They said guidebooks with the companion guide. The companion guide is a piece that was developed within our school system through some of our teachers and curriculum specialists. And the grade 6 through 8 teachers said that guidebooks are a guide. They understood that. They thought that they provided a good foundation. As far as some of them said that parts of it they really like, some of it not so much, but that there was value to, a good bit of the pieces. So what is challenging? They said time management, assessments. Also, again, the guidebooks didn't have the assessment piece with it. The writing. They said that there's a lot of repetition of tasks, but they said that the companion guides are helping with that, but that there is a lot of repetition, and that they need more choice in text, and that could be in the way of, some of the short stories and poetry and things like that. High school, and it's interesting, when you look at the curriculum across the different grade levels, you get a different perspective with the lower elementary and the secondary, because your teachers who are stronger in content, it's not, they're not juggling all the pieces like the elementary teachers. And so secondary teachers who are stronger in their content tend to want a little more autonomy than the lower elementary teachers. And I think that that's kind of what we're seeing here. So at the high school level, they said that guidebooks as a resource were useful, and that many of the guidebook materials were useful for them, and that they saw guidebooks as a guide. So they appreciate autonomy. Some of them felt like that they had autonomy, not all of them did. And also, too, they said that one of the deficiencies that they felt that they could really use some more grammar resources. And it's important to understand that when we adopt, like when we go through textbook adoption, typically in the past, we would adopt, and there are all of these supplemental resources for the teachers in the way of grammar practice and comprehension, and so just tons and tons of resources. But with the guidebooks, that's not what they have, because that's not a textbook adoption. It's more of an online type of resource. And again, at each level, the assessments were a layer that was missing, so we're definitely going to have to look at that. So switching gears a little bit and looking at math, with Eureka in the lower grades, with your elementary, the K to 5, the teachers were adamant that Eureka is working. They are going out there and pulling these resources from online themselves. They are seeking this information. Some administrators have purchased materials for them. This is not something that we have adopted as a school system, but I will tell you, they understand the importance of their curriculum being aligned to the content standards, and they are pulling in these resources. They're going to other state websites, they're going to other school system websites, and they're pulling the resources. So as far as us with implementation, with looking at our UIR schools, we are moving forward with some purchases because we know that we have to support these schools who are being required to implement Tier 1 curriculums. So since a lot of the schools have purchased materials on their own with the Eureka, that was the direction that we decided to go with the K to 5. And professional development will be offered, or not offered, but our schools that are UIR will be participating in that Eureka training right prior to school starting. And it has been opened up as an option for those schools that want it, but that is not a requirement. So with the Eureka at the K through 5 level, asking them what is challenging, they said gathering materials, trying to pull together the resources that they need to implement the student resources, the assessments, and the parent resources, like the parent letters and the homework assignments, those things that they're sending home. They felt like they needed formal training, and they also said that they needed more training on math content. With addressing the Common Core standards, there's an expectation at the elementary level for teachers to teach students to develop have a conceptual understanding. As someone who was a math major, I just automatically taught that way. But teachers at the elementary level, they're generalist, and they have to cover ELA, math, science, and social studies. So they have a broad knowledge of all subject areas, and maybe with math, not as much depth as they would need to be able to teach conceptually. So they're saying that they feel like they need more training with content. And also, too, they want to have formal training with Eureka. For math, grades 6 through 8, they're using a variety of resources from the past adoption. And also at the high school level, they're doing the same. They feel like they need more focus with curriculum. And they also feel like that they need additional support and resources aligned to the content standards. With respect to gifted, I met with 2 groups of gifted teachers, one group being ELA, one being for mathematics. The gifted teachers for math said the way that they make sure that they are addressing the needs of the gifted students, they have grade level text for math. They take the on-level standards, the on-grade level standards, they expand those standards to 2 or more grade levels, and it's based on the individual student's needs as to what they are able to handle. With 7th grade, they have acceleration to algebra, which is a year in advance. Also, Algebra 1 in the 8th grade. They also indicated another way that they're meeting the needs of the students is that they are engaging them in project-based learning. So that's a way of them enriching. With the ELA, they are also enriching and extending. They're using guidebooks and novels. They said that with the guidebooks and the novels that they accelerate the pacing. Then with the additional time, they are supplementing the text and activities. They are also engaging them in project-based learning, choice, and creative writing. The gifted teachers that I met with assured me that they are differentiating and meeting the needs of the gifted students. So in moving forward, my plans are to continue conversations with teachers because I feel like that we need to listen to them, to their voice. They are the professionals. They're the ones who are in the classrooms. I also want to make sure that we are adding aligned resources to the guaranteed curriculum to support teacher choice, to increase teacher access to aligned curriculum resources, to increase access to aligned professional development. So returning to our living statements of every child every day and doing what's best for kids and making sure that we're providing them with learning to last a lifetime. It's our responsibility to take them when they come to us in pre-K at 4 years of age and do our very best at each and every step along the way to get them across the stage and to prepare them for what lies ahead. Thank you.
Ms. Lemaine, an excellent presentation. I'd like to see if I have any comments from any board members, any questions. Mr. Dermott?
Thank you, Mr. Kuzan. When I got on this board, I said I wasn't going to work on this curriculum, but here I go. Ms. Lemaine, if I could back up into your presentation a little bit, when we talked about the subgroup intervention labels, can you kind of expand upon that and maybe give me an example of how that would impact, let's say, a high school?
A high school, sure. So let's say, for example, with the EL students, if you have a subgroup, all it takes is 10 students to create a subgroup. So if you had 10 EL students, it's going to, and so what they would do is they would calculate a score, like a school performance score, using that same accountability formula for that subgroup of 10 students. And if that subgroup had an F, then that would put them in, for 2 years, in that urgent intervention required. So let's say a school like Mandeville High that has about 2,000 students, and that's just a ballpark, that a subgroup with just 10 students could make them a UIR school.
And this is based upon the state's new configuration of
It's part of
scoring
their
and
ESSA
rating
plan,
and-
right, and that fits into their ESSA plan that they submitted.
Okay. I got a couple of 10
students, let me just
Yeah,
repeat that.
10 students out of
at a school
2,000.
of 2,000 students at a high school, 10.
Could impact, have a tremendously negative impact on a high-performing school.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, because I'm looking at these numbers and it's just mind-boggling. And I mean, I looked at our test scores and how they dropped 20 points. And I don't think our children scored that much, I guess, poorly compared to prior years that we were showing increases. And our teachers have been working extremely hard. I mean, just so that some people can understand this. I mean, I've been on the board since 2003. So we fought the fight through all of the Common Core, through all of the changes and all whatever, as here in St. Tammany. I mean, some of the people mentioned Mary Kay, Belisario. We fought this tooth and nail at the state level, through the state legislature, through the State Department of Ed, through Bessie. Every avenue that we could, we fought this. So now here we are, fast forward 10, 12 years, and here we are. And all of a sudden, we dropped 20 points in our scoring, not because our children and our teachers are doing less. It's through manipulation of scores and the way that they do this. The problem that y'all don't maybe fully understand is because of these manipulation of the scores, that they put these schools in jeopardy. Our schools, our children, our teachers. They put everything in jeopardy, our funding. So now, because if we have these scores the way they are, and trust me, what you've seen tonight is what the state says they are, even though we totally disagree in how it's calculated. The problem is that it is going to impact our funding. Well, half of our funding for our district comes from the state, over $200 million. Now, they make us buy tier 1 material. They only have one set of curriculum that's tier 1. So we're forced to buy tier 1 because our schools are now in these other criterias. So I understand why y'all are here, and I truly get it. But who doesn't get it is the people that are in Baton Rouge and on the Bessie board and sit in the state legislature and the Department of Ed. They're the ones that doesn't get it, or maybe they really do get it. And this is about privatization of public education to get to the money. That's what all this is about. It's not about education. But in order for us to do what I think we have to do to maintain ourselves is to address some of these discrepancies. And if that means that we have to go and follow and play the game to get it to where our students are successful, and I see Ms. Barrios shaking her head. But if we don't do this, who is going to protect our teachers' jobs? Who is going to protect the future of the children until we get a voice back in Baton Rouge that will listen to us? Yeah, I understand what y'all are saying, but trust me, when you look at these numbers, our hands are virtually tied. We have fought the fight. We have fought it and fought it and fought it. Trust me, my wife's a teacher. I hear her come home. I hear her complain. I do. She works long hours. But I also understand that there's hopefully a light at the end of this tunnel, and it isn't Common Core, and it isn't standardized testing. But we have to get to a certain point to where someone will listen to us, and they're not going to listen to St. Tammany when our test scores don't interact. We have other districts that have taken on this curriculum and these standards 100%, and they are outscoring us dramatically, dramatically. Look, I'm not a fan of Eureka math. I'm old school. I get it. But I also understand that in order for us to be competitive on a state level, we have to make some changes. And that's my point.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, with the standards, standards are not bad. What's bad is when the test, the assessment becomes the standard. So if we're teaching the standards, yes, that's what's on the assessment, and, you know, and we're addressing and we align things, then I think that we're going to be in good shape. And as far as like the Eureka curriculum, you know, there are other things that are available now because it's been quite a few years. And, you know, for some of our upper grades, we may need to look at that. Our elementary grades, the teachers really felt good about the Eureka. They are just asking for the training from, you know, the primary sources. They want real trainers to come in and provide the training, and they're also asking for the supplemental resources that go along with them. They are embracing this. Our teachers understand the importance of them having instruction provided to students that's aligned to content standards. I mean, even NCTM, you know, when you go to NCTM, which is the National Council of Teacher of Mathematics, the content standards there are the Common Core standards. So even the resources there and the conferences, all of those things that are out there, are aligned. And so our teachers are just really seeking the opportunity to have those things in their classrooms that support the learning, and that they're not constantly having to create their own assessments. And so hopefully, that's something that we can move forward and look at some different options. And I want to continue the conversations that I'm having with teachers to make sure that we are meeting their needs in the classrooms.
And I totally agree with that. Years ago, when we first started having this discussion about Eureka Math and some other components that were within the Common Core, we went on somewhat of a road trip with board members to various schools around our district and met with teachers and had them explain to us their thoughts, concerns, preferences, whatever it may be. And we took that and we actually modified some of the board's positioning on the Eureka Math at that time to allow our teachers the flexibility that as professionals they deserve. And we will continue to do that. In the same light of what we're talking about, for St. Tammany Parish to be 47% out of 60 here, that's not acceptable. And we need to figure out a way to make those changes, in my opinion. But I think when we look at conceptually the way the state has designed this program is flawed.
Correct.
And until we can get the people elected in Baton Rouge to change this, it is going to inevitably be changed each year, every year, just like it has been for the last 7 or 8 years, so that it's manipulated to a desired outcome. That's what this is really derived to. But I mean, when you take a high school student that scores a 21 on an ACT test, that is a nationally based test, and the school gets nothing if that child doesn't score a 21. If he scores a 20.9, the school gets 0. The teacher gets a 0. The district gets a 0. But yet, the child could still be eligible for a top scholarship to a voc-technical college with a lower ACT score of a 17, 18 score. But yet the school gets a 0. Y'all, there's something wrong with this. It is blatantly designed to try to make public education and public school teachers look like they have failed. And that's the furthest from the truth. And I'll stop talking.
You're right.
And just in response to that, statewide assessments should not be assessing whether or not students meet content standards. Our teachers in the classroom should be determining whether or not those standards are being met, and we as a school system should be determining whether or not the standards are being met, not a statewide assessment. So
And I think that's the local control that Mr. Dermott.
absolutely, absolutely. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dermott. Any other board members? Come in.
First of all, I wanted to thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you.
I can tell you put a lot of work into this,
Yes.
and I appreciate the efforts you've taken, I think, in 3 days, you said? Okay. And I realize that's a lot of time, and I bet your poor voice was tired. But I do have a couple questions. Can you repeat, how many teachers did you say you met with?
I think the exact number was 122.
Okay. And then, what's our big number here? How many teachers do we have in our district? I'm just curious.
About, it's over 3,000.
Okay. And then, how did you select these individuals?
I reached out to administrators.
Okay,
And with it being summer, I asked for a list of names because I wanted to make sure that if we couldn't get the first person, that we would go to the next.
Gotcha, that's great. And then to Mr. Dermott's point, how much of you said 50% of our funding is wrapped, specifically with the Tier 1, the funding
The
associated?
Tier
What's
1
the dollar
funding-
amount that as a district we risk losing?
As far as losing,
And that
I'm
may
not
be a
really
piece.
sure about the budget, from that standpoint. All I can speak to is the super app that we were required to submit. And I want to say that the amount of funding with that was like $800,000.
800,000, right?
Right.
Okay,
For
that's-
professional development
Okay.
and resources, correct.
I'm writing my own notes. Okay, so here are my thoughts, and this is the thing. This is such a complex situation, and there is no easy answer. We do want local control, and the formula, as we've talked about, it's really messed up, especially at the state level. In fact, I don't think there's anyone in here that is content with our BUSI board right now. So with all that said, I empathize with the stressors that not just our teachers are under, but you, the central office, and because you're trying to problem solve in what I feel, honestly, you're navigating with blinders on. You don't. They're changing this formula ever so much, and it. With that said, it's creating a dynamic that is very uncomfortable for us. We do not like seeing the scores drop from a 104, 105, and then drop to an 85. That's discouraging to see that. But I think the one thing I want to say is I've been on this board now, we're in the month of July, so 7 months. Outside of a finance meeting back in August, I've never seen this room this full. And this is what I want to say to you. I'm asking the public, in fact, would you mind just show of hands? You are here to talk about curriculum. I am here because curriculum. Thank you. That's what I wanted to see. So my point is simply this. If we really want to make change, as Mr. Dermott pointed out, you've got to start fighting this at the state level. If you want change, you have to change what's happening at the state. It is so easy. Please understand, it's easy to be upset at the board. But Mr. Dermott is absolutely correct. We're trying to juggle with the cards that are being dealt to us. We're trying to play the best game we can. And what's really sad is that the state's not thinking about what's best for children. This is a business to them. And there's a lot of politics. And I'm really sorry that this is where we are as a nation, as a state, actually. I've talked about this before, whether we like the state funding formula, the formula or not. It's honestly, it's what we have to deal with. But I want to ask you, as a public, as a central office, as a board, to expand your lens. As much as we don't like this state formula, the reality is Louisiana, the state, is sitting second from the bottom. It depends on which one you look at. NEA says 48. USA Today, I think, says 50th. And if I mean, I'm going to assume some of the people who took the time to talk to us tonight, they're not content with what's going on. Well, I'm pretty positive you're not content with hearing that your state is sitting at the bottom of the barrel. And yes, according to the statistic that Ms. Oger just emailed us, it looks like there was a very slight ACT decrease, I think, in 2018. I think that's what it said. And I'm going to go and read it when I get home. But here's the deal. If you want change, we have to change it at the state level. And I'm begging our public to get involved because we are trying to make decisions that are in the best interest of this district with what we have to deal with.
Are you finished, Ms. Richardson?
I'm just making sure. Yes, I am done.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Ms.
Sorry.
Richardson. Next, we have Mr. Broad. Mr. Broad.
Thank you. I want to thank you for the presentation. I'm not a curriculum person. I probably couldn't spell it. So this is all new to me. My background is numbers. And so I did some research, and I'm going back and I'm looking at some of the other schools in the state. And we were beat out by three schools that I consider large schools. We were beat out by more than those, but you know, when you come to Zachary with one high school, I don't consider that. So if I look at the three schools that beat us out, the smallest one is 14,000 students, and I have a warm heart for Lafourche Parish since I graduated from Thibodeau High. And I'm looking at the numbers, and I really don't know how to interpret all this, but basically I think the statewide assessment, which is most of what we've been talking about tonight, works out to be, what, 1/4 of the total score?
It depends on,
And then you have a progress, which I don't know what portion of that is in there also. You have the ACT score,
correct. So
which
the high school. Mhm.
accounts for like 25% or something.
Correct.
And you have strength of diploma,
Mhm.
which counts for another approximately 25% or 20%, somewhere in there. And then you have the graduation rate.
Correct.
Okay, I'm comparing these numbers, and we're not doing so badly on the,
No.
I mean, we're maybe 5 points behind on the state assessment.
They're-
5 points behind the leaders.
Where they're hitting us is with the growth factor.
Growth factor, okay. But again, those two combined, maybe we're down 10 points on that. We beat them on ACT scores, all three of them. We beat them by, well, the highest one, the closest that we did not beat was, we were ahead by 4.7% or something like that, maybe 3.7. So we're beating them on ACT, which, from my view, is a better indicator that we are doing the right thing for our students and educating them, because that's comparing them with a national, not some made-up Louisiana thing that's a moving target. I think what we have to do, and I'm looking at the numbers, and what they are kicking our butt on is the strength of diploma and the graduation rate.
Right.
Huge differences there. I think we're spending a lot of time on curriculum, which I think we're probably doing pretty good on. Maybe not as good as they are, but we really need to focus on the high point values that are in the other areas as well.
That's one piece of the puzzle, and when you look at the high school level, that's a huge piece, but when you look at the K-8 piece, that the biggest part, like you have 25%, that is the LEAP piece, and then also another 25 is that growth piece. So there's more of an impact when you look at that, and then when you look at the number of, right, look
I
at the
couldn't
number of
figure out the
schools.
numbers and come up
It
with the
is-
score
it
they
is-
came up
It
with.
is complicated, and some of the pieces, there's no way for us to even calculate that on our own because they're doing comparisons. So,
Okay, then I feel better that I couldn't come up with the formula.
yeah, I'm a math major, and I was frustrated.
All right.
And to Ms. Richardson's point, I think this is my 9th year as superintendent, and for each of these 9 years, we've had a different form. There's never been
No.
a single apples to apples from one year to the next to compare. Never in the last 9 years.
So if we go whole hog into trying to meet their assessment, it's gonna change next year.
It's changed.
But the key to it is that we're teaching the standards, that we're providing teachers with the resources that align to the standards. That's the key,
And not to the test that they're assessing.
not to the test.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Hines?
Thank you, Mr. Kuzan. Ms. Lemaine, I want to back up just a little bit and compliment you on, your first presentation as assistant superintendent, and tell you that you seem to have jumped in with both feet, and we appreciate that very much. We know that you've worn many hats in our system, and we think that'll help you very much. As I have expressed before, you seem to have this really great knack of taking data and assessing it and then helping us find a direction, and I think that'll be one of your strengths, and I appreciate that. And you've really shown that already in this, I guess it might be your first full week, and
Day 7. Not counting.
well, I do appreciate that. And this discussion came about because we knew that it was time to get on the same page with our teachers, the board, administration regarding the curriculum. I feel like back in the year 2014, we had a discussion about Eureka Math, and we decided to pull it from the make the teachers, it was pulled, we phased out the use of it, but we still told teachers that they could use it as a supplement. And I think that we handicapped them in some ways because they didn't know what they were supposed to teach. We stuck with the guaranteed curriculum and said that it was a curriculum that was going to be changing and always changing, but they didn't know exactly where to go with, what to use. And it was important that they have clear expectations of how to implement the curriculum. And they wanted the ability to use, differentiate and use the materials that they felt like they needed. And I felt like the board sent a message that they were able to do that, but obviously it didn't translate down.
Right.
So it's definitely time to, get this out in the open and let teachers realize that we want them to use the curriculum and be able to differentiate for our students in the classrooms. Mr. Darwin is very right. This board has fought on many levels at the state level. We have met, Representative Carter, who's been on the Education Committee for a long time, seemed to have this vision of what education should look like in Louisiana. And we met in my dining room many nights. We had people from many areas of the state come, and we talked about what was happening in education, and then, boom, it just got on the fast track to create all these rules and change the formula, and it's just been a whirlwind of change, and it's never the same every year. And so we're beating our heads against the wall, trying to score better. So it's been very frustrating. I know to teachers in the classroom, I know to administration, and I know for the board, because we've passed resolutions, we've met with representatives, we've talked to people on national levels, at national conventions, we've sat down with the head of, when we went to NSBA, we sat down with Miss O'Brien, I can't remember her name, and Ann O'Brien, and discussed with her what we saw happening in Louisiana with education. And just happened anyway. We didn't seem to make any headway. So, now we know that we don't want our scores to keep dropping. And we know that our children are doing well in the classrooms. And I know that, you made a comment about we should be proud of our educators. I am very proud of our educators.
Absolutely.
And I think everyone on this board is very proud of our educators. But we need to be able to provide them with the resources we need. We don't want our schools taken over by the state. So if we have to use some Tier 1 curriculum material, then we're going to have to use it. But I know that our teachers are going to be, after they're trained on it, that they'll use it, but they'll be able to differentiate. Like this teacher who said she brought up her students at Carolyn Park Elementary. She worked hard. She did what she was supposed to do. She used some of the curriculum, but she also differentiated the curriculum. And she met her students' needs, and I applaud you. And Ms. Timmons, who talked about implementing the math curriculum with fidelity and implementing it the right way, we knew that when the Eureka Math came out, we sat down with the people, some of the people who had worked in Baton Rouge at the Kane Institute to set up the Eureka curriculum, and we felt like it had merit, but we knew that it had flaws in it from the beginning because there were mistakes in the black line masters that the teachers were supposed to use. It was confusing. It started out, we were supposed to phase it in. It didn't get phased in. So, it's just been a debacle, but we're trying to do the best we can. We need your help. We need you to advocate on the state level. Be there with us to advocate. And, I appreciate you being here this evening, and you talked about what was in your classroom, that you put up the sign, is it best for children? Well, when I was in a St. Tammany classroom in 10th grade geometry, I remember the teacher having the listen on the board, a sign to listen. And I've tried to keep that in mind as a student, as a former teacher, as a mother, parent, and a board member. So thank you for being here tonight, and thank you, Ms. Lemaine, for this presentation. Mr. Kuzin, I was wondering if you wanted to queue up the list, for any other board member that wanted to speak. Ms. Campbell could do that for you.
I think I was the last one.
All right, just,
Well, you were
just,
the last one. Any other board member? Ms. Lamy?
all right, thank you.
Okay, we'll go Ms. Lamy, and then we'll go with Mr. Hersey, okay?
Okay, I'm going to try to keep it short, and I think that I was saved for last so that I could rethink everything I was saying, because I get very passionate, but I'm new to the board as well. I'm a teacher. I'll always be a teacher, and so my entire reason for being here is to be an advocate for teachers and students. I was in the classroom and told to teach Common Core stuff, and I went through the battle of what's right for kids, but obeying and doing what I need to do, and I became, just like you, Ms. Johns, I did what was best for my kids, no matter what was going to happen. Because at the end of the day, and when I went to sleep at night, I had to see how my kids grew so I could look their parents in the face and tell them where their struggles were, where their strengths were, and how I got them there. I know the pressure on teachers, and I really thought it was ridiculous that these people on the board who have no clue about education get to make all the rules. And that's really why I ran. Couldn't believe I won. Now that I know everyone, I realize how false that opinion was, because they care so much. And I really didn't think they did, and I really didn't like any of them before I got on here, because I thought that they didn't care. They just told us what to do, and they had no idea what works and what didn't work, and it was frustrating until I became a board member and I realized the political nonsense is disgusting. And so they've all kind of covered what stuff I was going to say, but Mr. Foltz and I had a conversation before about, okay, do we want to say, you know what, our teachers are the best, and they know what to do, and let's let them meet the standards the way they need to, and we're going to prepare our kids to be the best they can be. Okay, now all you parents that see those scores keep going down and down, don't you start talking about St. Tammany Parish and how they're not. You won't, and you won't, and you won't, because you know. But what about everyone else? We constantly get pressure about stuff like that too. Now, does that mean we sacrifice our children for the score? No, but we either need to educate our neighbors and our teachers, or we need to make some changes. As a classroom teacher, any curriculum I was given, I never found a curriculum that did it. I did it. I did it with whatever I needed to do it, and I was responsible for the end. When someone tells you exactly what to do, how to do it, and when to do it, I don't know how they can make you responsible for the outcome at the end. And we kept talking about teacher autonomy. And so I just figured I'd look it up while I was sitting here to read the exact definition so we can just remind ourselves. It's the concept of teacher autonomy refers to the professional independence of teachers in schools, especially to the degree to which they can make autonomous decisions about what they teach to students and how they teach it. Then you are responsible for the outcome. We have standards, and we're going to provide training so that when you do use these curriculums, you use them correctly and you have background knowledge, since we didn't learn that way. But that does not mean that's your Bible. You shouldn't be reading scripts, and we need to encourage new teachers or teachers who are afraid and being scared to do what they need to do. We need to mentor them and help them, because we do have the best teachers. I believe that. Okay, I'm finished. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lamy.
Okay.
Mr. Hersey?
Thank you. There's two moves being made here. The first one, with Common Core and the grading systems and calculations, Eureka Math, all of that. The first one's the removal of your local school boards. The second one is to have non-certificated teachers teaching in the classrooms. You hit on a very good point. I don't know if you were aware of that, ma'am, but that's where this is headed. And it's not local people pushing it. This has been going on for years now, and that's where they're headed. Once they get control of the school boards and have non-certificated teachers, they have complete control. Thank you.
All right. Okay, I need to recognize Mr. Green for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzan. I just have two quick questions. Ms. Lane, thank you for your presentation. One, is there any directive from this administration that teachers teach strictly from a script?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, thank you. And then secondly, can we potentially expand our professional development outside of non-UIR schools so that our other teachers can
Absolutely.
receive professional
The
development on
training
these?
that's being offered prior to school is open to other schools. However, we are looking at, it seems to be meeting the needs of the K-5, but we may need to reassess where we are with the junior highs and the high schools.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I just want to say you had an excellent presentation, but I want to open it up. Wait, I'm sorry. Okay, I miss you. Ms. Page?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I heard a couple people say we are failing our students, and I just wanted to remind everyone about our National Merit Scholars. We had 9 National Merit Scholars this past spring that were recognized at a school board meeting. 9 National Merit Scholars. That's national, United States of America, okay? We also have a student that scored a perfect on the ACT twice, not once, but twice, okay? And he also scored a perfect on the SAT. So I think we need to remember that when we use that statement. Great presentation.
Thank you. And our teachers are not failing our students. The teachers that I met with are passionate about what they do, and they care very deeply about the success of our students.
Okay, I'm going to ask now for some comments from the public, but I'd like to say this. As per policy, and we have another meeting, when you come up to speak, public, you have no more than 2 minutes, and you may speak only one time, okay? So right now, I'd like to thank Ms. Lemaine for her presentation, which was excellent, and I'd like to open up the comments from the public. Do I have any comments from the public? Okay, I'm going to recognize Ms. Barrios.
Lee Barrios. So I'm jumping out of my skin, as you can well imagine, especially you that know me. The fight that I had put up and the difference between me and some of you who profess to have given up this fight, I will not give this up. It cannot be given up because John White will take over all of our schools if you don't fight. What I'm asking you to do is to take up the challenge of openly and publicly fighting what is going on. And you now have legal standing, and I will be happy to get in the weeds with any of you about this. As per his controlling and limiting funds based on compliance with his testing, performance evaluation, and curricular choices, that is illegal. State law says the state cannot dictate curriculum. The fact that he uses blackmail and withholding ESSA funds is illegal. You all need to fight that. First, it needs to be made public. You need to get your Louisiana School Boards Association. You need to go with the Department of Ed and the Office of Civil Rights on these things. Applying his accountability system based on a single high-stakes standardized test for which he alone can and does manipulate to produce the results he wants. Teachers were put in jail in Atlanta, Georgia, for changing test scores and cheating on tests. This is no different when you're talking about manipulating scores in order to get federal funding. This is illegal. You need to get into the weeds on that with the lawyer. Thirdly, promoting and approving a single curriculum as being the only one aligned. That is ludicrous when the Department of Ed has a long list under their what works. I forgot what it's called, but it's for the federal government. Long list of their evaluations of curriculum. John, if you will let me just continue for another minute or two.
I'm going to have to hear you to the 2 minutes. Would you please sum it up, please?
I think it's very
Can you give me a
unfair
sum
that
up?
administration gets to present and we can't. I'm trying to give you a solution here. I will sum it up.
Okay.
I have these 2 last points. John White calls his curriculum tiered curriculum. The U.S. Department of Ed and ESSA calls their curriculum tiered curriculum. The big difference is John White's curriculum has no evidence, or in his evaluations, there's no evaluations for evidence or research. The Department of Ed requires evidence for their tier. But when he uses the term tier to the Department of Ed, they don't understand that there's a huge difference in that, okay? That needs to go to the Department of Ed. You all need to fight that. And fourthly, well, I've already said about mandating district curriculum, okay? The law specifically states, I don't care how you try to twist it, that districts have the right over their curriculum. And the idea that students cannot pass the LEAP math test if they aren't filled with Eureka math is false. I've had expert math teachers throughout the state tell me that students who are taught traditional math and the fundamentals will do better on those tests than students that are given full Eureka. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public speak? Come up and state your name, please.
Hi, my name is Diane Moore again. I wear many different hats. Earlier I had on my public school mom hat from many years ago. Now I'm going to put on my homeschool hat, which I've talked to you before about. We didn't get to have public comments on the vote that you took earlier that was talking about allowing foreign exchange students to come in as juniors or seniors. It's interesting, Ms. DiCarlo presented this. She was the principal at my children's school when they were in public school. She was an excellent principal. I have also one more son. He's been homeschooled mainly because I knew that this math program would be coming up again during his education, and I didn't want him exposed to it. So he's been homeschooled. He wanted to go back to school when he was a junior last year, but the school system, St. Tammany, denied this taxpaying citizen his free appropriate public education because they would not let him come in and accept any of his credits. So I am hearing that students from foreign countries now that do not have the same credit standards that we have are being allowed in our schools. They've not paid taxpayer dollars. I did. My student, also my son, has an ACT score that I'm now hearing you would get money for because his score beats the St. Tammany Parish Public School averages. Here's a good hint for you. If you want to raise those scores, allow homeschoolers that have qualifying scores back into the system. Many would come in their high school years if they were allowed. They're not allowed back in the school. Now I'm going to put on my other hat. I used to be a public school teacher in the St. Tammany Parish. I taught gifted students. When I stood before my school parents at open house, I always told them, first thing, you're the boss. You are my boss. Because long after these school students leave my classroom, you're going to have them. You're going to have them next year, and you're going to have them for the rest of your life. Listen to these parents. These parents are telling you this curriculum does not work. Your teachers are telling you this curriculum does not work. 4 of the 5 top math universities in our country wrote to this school system and told you this school math program does not work.
Okay, thank you.
Listen to these people.
We need to sum it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Jody Griswold. I am a teacher. I teach the babies. I teach first grade, and I love it with a passion that is hard to put into words. I love being a teacher, and I love working with youth. I love seeing their minds grow. Reading in particular is something that is just so inspiring for me to see in my students when that light bulb goes off. I've taught for 25 years, so I know a little bit about what I'm doing. Ready Gen is the curriculum that we were given this past school year, and teachers are not pleased with it. It lacks a phonics component. Phonics is the key to reading. If you know sounds and letters, then you can read. You put them together. That's what I tell my students. Put them together and you can read. But if you don't have phonics instruction, you're not going to be able to read. As an adult, when I come across a word that I'm unfamiliar with, what do? You sound it out. That's how we read. And of course, you have vocabulary. That also plays a role as well. But ReadyGen is lacking in phonics content. The stories are not developmentally appropriate. They are above grade level. The Lexile levels are not on a first grade level. The students cannot read the content that they're given. It's discouraging. And so please, if you would just take to heart what we are saying, I say this out of love for my students. I'm not here to bash anybody or to say anything bad about the school board, but I was, and I thank you for being invited to the meeting the other day, and I was part of one of your groups. There were 9 teachers in that group, and we all chuckled when it came to ReadyGen because it is inadequate and it is developmentally inappropriate. It's not funny, but we don't know what to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening again. Do you need my name again? Kristin Timmons. First of all, I want to say that I'm so very encouraged as a teacher to hear so many board members say that you all support us receiving professional development and resources and support to be able to appropriately teach our students the content standards that we're required. Some of the things that I've heard and haven't directly necessarily been said, but kind of the sense I get, there's sort of this feeling that the old way of teaching math is the best way. So I'm going to give you an analogy, and I think it's one that we can probably mostly all relate to, and that is your phone. So when I graduated high school in 1998, this didn't exist. There were cell phones, but my family still had a landline in the kitchen with, I don't know, like 8-foot cord, so we could go all around the house. And we still had an answering machine. It wasn't called a voicemail yet. And Google wasn't a verb. Nowadays, this is a thing. You can live your whole life through it. It does like 20 million things that phones can't do or didn't do. And as much as that technology has changed in just 20-ish, 21 years, I am charged with preparing students mathematically for things that I can't begin to imagine are going to be their careers in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I'm sorry if people feel uncomfortable with it, but the old way of teaching math is not going to be good enough. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank all of you for your comments tonight. And I'd like to say that if you have any more input, would you make them an appointment with Ms. Lemaine and discuss this? Believe me, every person on this board and everyone in this room tonight have the same, you're here for a reason, and we're here for a reason. And it's the students of St. Tammany Parish. Nobody wish harm to anyone in here tonight. In 50 years of education, I've been in this system, associated with this system for 50 years. And I'm gonna tell you, I've been with others. I've been in education. I've been a college athletic director. I've been in visited a lot of systems. But I can tell you, this board here has the best interests of the students of St. Tammany Parish. Now, and I know you have the same thing. So in closing, I'm gonna say thank you for coming. and we really have another meeting to go to. Anybody else? Okay. I move we adjourn.